Okay, let's get started here. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. I'm Nancy Hazard. Those of you who came to the last room, you're going to have to hear a little bit of what I said last time again. But anyway, here we go. So I'm Nancy Hazard. I'm with Greenfield, and Greenfield's mission is to work towards sustainability, which we define, or which is defined as the sweet spot where environmental justice, economic vitality, and environmental quality are all addressed at the same time. And so everything we do that has to do with climate and biodiversity and all the other things we do, they all have to meet that criteria. So before we go too far, I want to introduce you to some of the other Greenfield members who are here tonight who are helping out. Edie Heineman was at the front door and welcomed you. And then at the back, where the registration table is, maybe wave your hand, is Mary Westervelt, and Judy Draper is behind her. And then over here in the Greenfield World table is Sarah Brown Anson. So, thank you. I also want to introduce you to Janet Masucci over here, who's our videographer par excellence, and I want to thank her for filming this event. And we will send you the link after the event, and we urge you to watch it again or send it on to friends that you have. So our schedule this evening, I'm going to talk for actually about almost 10 minutes. Hope that doesn't bore you too much. About the Mass Save program, the history itself, and our goal for the work. Then after that, I'll introduce the speakers, and they'll talk for 30 to 40 minutes collectively, and there will be lots of time for questions and answers. So if someone will speak, then you can ask clarifying questions, then the next person, and then we'll have a bigger Q&A at the end. So there we go. So in Massachusetts, about 40% of the carbon emissions are created by buildings, and so that's why we're focusing on buildings tonight. Mass Save was established in 2008. Actually, when I looked this up, I was a little surprised. It was interesting. To help the Commonwealth achieve the climate goals by reducing use of electricity, gas, oil, and propane. It's a utility-run program, and the program's funding comes from us. We all pay an energy efficiency fee on our gas and electric bills to cover the cost. So there's no other funding other than ourselves, and then it's bundled together and given back to us if you ask for it. So don't be shy. So Mass Save offers a range of energy efficiency services for residents and commercial customers. So everyone is eligible on the sort of residential side: homeowners, renters, and landlords. And tonight we're going to talk, of course, just about the residential program. Since 2008, the Massachusetts legislature has made a commitment to reduce our emissions to zero by 2050. And they have a roadmap in order to do that, and they've set 5-year goals along the way. Because of this commitment, our electricity must become cleaner every year. So that's one of the other advantages of moving to electricity. So the strategy is that if everybody switched from oil, natural gas, and propane and gasoline to electricity for heating and cooling our buildings and for transportation, then we're all contributing towards getting to that zero goal in 2050. And we're organizing this workshop because we wanted to spread the word about some amazing new rebates on heat pumps and heating systems, which everybody's going to be talking about more, which run on electricity and not only replace the oil, gas, and propane, but also offer a very cost-effective air conditioning. So I'm going to give a quick overview of sort of what you can find online. Mass Save offers 3 programs that are based on your income. So we've got this slide up here of income eligibility. And all of the program for the income eligible people, so people on the left, your left, is it's run by the Community Action Pioneer Valley. And it's a very straightforward program. You basically need to have your income eligibility verified. And then once you do that, you sign up, and someone comes and talks to you to help you draw up a plan. And they will do all the arranging for the contractors to come to your home and do the work. And after everything is done, they send someone over to inspect all the work and be sure that it was done correctly. Last week we had a workshop where we invited Peter Wingate, who's the director of the Community Action Plan, and his staff to talk about the program. Many of you actually attended that as well. And as you know, we videotaped that, so you can watch that one also and move that on once it's completed. Today we're focusing on everyone who is not income eligible. And the process in order to go through that is much more complicated than the income eligible one. So a lot of things are left up to you, as you're going to discover and listen to two people who went through the process. So you have to find the auditor to assess your home, and then if you're interested in a heat pump, you need to get estimates from different contractors. You need to decide who you want to work with, what's a good deal, and you need to deal with all of the ins and outs of financing. If you're a renter, you can get some light bulbs and some water, whatever, aerators, but obviously you're going to have to convince your landlord to engage with the program. But one of the things that's interesting about that is that if you're income eligible, you can actually, let's say you live in a two-family home and the owner lives in half and you live in the other half. If you're income eligible, that means that 50% of the renters, of the occupants of that home are income eligible, and Community Action will come in and deal with the entire building at no cost to the landlord. So again, if it's a four-family, and by the way, this program that we're talking about is between 1 and 4 family homes, then two of the apartments have to have people in them that are income eligible. But that's an amazing deal for the landlord and for yourself. This is just a sampling of, I find looking things up on the website at MassSave is kind of daunting. I just have a hard time finding things, and sometimes I find something one day and then I go back and I can't ever find it again. It's really frustrating. So anyway, I thought I'd just show you a few things here. This is just a list of some of the rebates that they offer, and you can find this kind of stuff on. Oh, one of the other rebates that actually is not listed here, which I think is pretty cool, is they give you a rebate if you want to purchase some electric lawn equipment. And electric lawn equipment is incredibly polluting. So changing to an electric lawnmower or one of those weed whacker thingies or whatever, those are all eligible. In order to get started and to get an audit, you have two ways of doing that. You can call MassSave, and people keep telling me, oh, I've called MassSave and no one returns my call. There is another way of doing it. You can go through, as it says here, you choose a local home performance contractor. And how do you find those? Well, you can go on the MassSave website and go through, and you'll eventually find a place where you can click on it that will tell you who the home performance contractors are. So these are companies that have been vetted by MassSave and approved to do the audit. If you Google MassSave, what you'll find is that there's a long list of home performance contractors, and up in the upper right-hand corner it says sponsor, and then it lists the company. And if you go, those are the home performance contractors who want your business. So they come up first. And then if you have to look through, sometimes 4 or 5 down, in order to even find the MassSave website, it kind of gets buried underneath all of those home performance contractors. So anyway, those are a few little tips on how to navigate the MassSave website and the history. Are there any questions about that kind of thing? Yes.
So if you had an audit on your house like 2 years ago, Do you get in touch with them and ask them to do it again?
Wisty, I think our first speaker is going to respond to that question.
Okay.
So we'll save that one.
Okay.
Okay, so tonight we've asked Wisty Rohrbach and Travis Drury to share their experience in working with Mass Save in order to get heat pumps. And actually, I'm also curious about, we sent out a link to a video called What's All the Hoopla About Heat Pumps that the Shelburne Energy Committee held a meeting a couple of months ago. Did anybody click through on that and watch it? Okay, one, okay. And how was it for you? So did it give you sort of, yeah. Yeah, it was okay, okay.
Would you name it again?
We'll send it back to you again. We'll do a follow-up email to this.
Okay.
So thank you. It's hard to remember all these details. But I'd highly recommend it because what that video does is it explains how a heat pump works. But to me, the more helpful part, or most helpful part, was because for me it can be just a black box and it works. I don't really care how it works. But they talk about different configurations and like, well, if your house is like this or like that, you know, you might have you want one, or you have a whole house, or you know, it sort of gives you that kind of idea of what to expect, and helps you formulate questions for when you are talking to your heat pump contractor and that sort of thing. So I think it's a very useful if you're willing to sit through that hour of grueling information. Okay, finally, this brings me to introducing Wisty. So Wisty moved to Greenfield with her partner, Judy Draper, 16 years ago, and they've worked with Mass Save at least 3 times to weatherize their home. This past year, they decided to stop using natural gas for their heating system and to get a heat pump installed, and they did that for environmental reasons and the climate change issues. They knew, however, that natural gas is so much less expensive than, let's say, oil and propane. They knew they weren't going to be saving any money by making this step, but they still wanted to do that. Wisty's going to talk about their experience of working with Mass Save and the many steps it took to get a heat pump installed. Welcome, Wisty.
Hello, so glad you're here. I wish that this were several months ago and I was sitting in your place learning what I have to say now. So Judy and I really just felt this huge commitment to changing over to a heat pump for environmental reasons, and just feeling so strong about climate change. So this whole process that I'm going to tell you about took just about a year. And this was even after we had done the Mass Save 3 different times. So it was pretty laborious. I'm going to have a lot of different steps, and there will be a lot of information, but it's given partly on the chart that we have, and then there will be more. So if you can kind of get an overview of what I'm saying and not get real caught up in the details, because I'm telling you there are so many. And part of what I'm going to say about that then is, if you really are going to do this, as soon as you start the process, start keeping track of every email, put it in a special file, and every name of everybody you contact, because you don't know when you're going to need to go back to get another little piece of information that was back here. Who gave me that information? Where is it? And I'm sure that you know that feeling of looking through all your email for that one little thing. Which one was it? Which one was it? So one of my recommendations is, if you're going to do this, keep track of everything, and somehow come up with a good file system. So I wanted to put this picture up so that you could see. We have one of those houses, very typical in Greenfield, that is from like 1900. It's about 2,000 square feet. We had natural gas, duct system, which is very important. Yeah, so there we are. That's the house. So that's where it's going. All right, this is the outside unit. And it's just at the back corner of the house, and the people were really good, you know, looking around, working to see, you know, where it was gonna be hooked in. And you can see down on the bottom right, it goes into the basement there, because down in the basement is this unit, which looks just like our old furnace looked. So they took out the whole furnace, the gas furnace, and then they put this in. And Travis, who you're going to be hearing from pretty soon, knows more about this. Judy and I keep asking, we keep understanding little bits more. But my understanding is pretty much that the bottom part of this is almost all fan. And then the upper part of it is where there are these coils and stuff that, whatever. But then you can see that our duct comes in there up at the top. And so all of the heat that this is going to draw in from the outside is going to go through our same duct system. I think that this whole thing could not have happened without the duct system. I want to say one other thing is that when we were first starting to search for somebody to come and do the work, the first potential contractor who came and talked with us brought up that we could have a hybrid system, meaning we could have the natural gas and the heat pump and the electric system, and kind of told us about that and said, you know, like, whatever. At that point, it felt more secure to us. You know, we weren't quite ready to give up the whole thought, you know, like, oh, what if it doesn't work or whatever. And we eventually got more information about that, and we decided not to go the hybrid system, to just do all electric. So that's what we have. So I'm going to go through the steps that we went through just so that you know that. And then Travis is going to give you much more detailed information about once it is installed. I do want to say one other thing is, to me, it almost feels like I'm in a science fiction world still. Because there's so many things about the system that are so different than the natural gas. And Travis and I were just talking before this started, and we were even comparing the blower system and how different the sound is in the house because of the fans and the blower system and the way that works. And it was such a relief to me to hear what he said. We've had our unit in for almost 2 months now, and we're still questioning, should it be sounding that loud? Should it be doing this? Should it be doing that? It just works different. And I will also tell you that the house is very comfortable. It's incredibly comfortable. And yet we still have these questions and these worries because everything is so new. So let me, so go ahead and do step one, Nancy. So these are just the isolated steps on the chart that you have there, and that chart that you have, you'll be able to read it at home, but it'll be more difficult here. The biggest, so with Mass Save, we started years ago, and you know, whatever they suggested, we would do. And then we would have more questions and bring them in, whatever they suggested, we would do. One thing that we didn't realize as the years were going by, and we kept having this stuff done, is, you know, with Mass Save, and probably with the other people now who will contract, is they go and get the people who will do the work for you. And then the work gets done, and then somebody calls you and says, how is it? And now what they do online is say, will you send us pictures of it so they can see that the work was done right, you know, as much as they can tell. So what we know now and what we learned in process is there's a document that gets signed that says, yes, indeed, everything was done. You know, we said to do this, they did this, the work has been checked, it's all done, it's correct. You need that document later in order to get a loan. That was one of those occasions where searching for a possible email connection to get a hold of that document from somebody, that was really uncomfortable and scary. So that's the kind of thing, and if you're thinking of doing this, and if you have already had Mass Save come and then do the work, it would behoove you to start looking now to get that document. The stipulation is, in order to use your Mass Save work that you've had done, is it needs to be done within the last 2 years. If you get to like year 2.5 or 3, that's too long. So you have to have the work done like within a 2-year window before you get approved for all this stuff. Let me just double check. So, hopefully you've already had some mass work
I'm
done.
gonna ask a question about that.
Go
So
ahead.
what you're saying is, if it hasn't been done within 2 years, you need to get the audit before you move to your heat pump, is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Within 2 years.
yes. That's what we were told. We were told,
Repeat that so they.
okay, we were told you are really lucky because when we had the last work done, we didn't realize we were gonna get a heat pump. So we had had this work done. And so all of a sudden, we learned that we need documentation, that we've had this work done within 2 years. We didn't know that when we started the heat pump process. Luckily, we had had it done. And so we were just within a window of a couple months, and it would have been more than 2 years. So it was like, oh my goodness. So we had a lot of lucky things happen like that we were so naive about the process. And, yeah.
Just curious, the it that you had done, is that just the assessment, or is that following through with all the recommendations to completion?
Following through with everything to completion.
So you had to complete their recommendations in order to qualify for the heat pump?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, without that documentation, we would have gotten stopped. You know, even the contractor probably wouldn't have proceeded with us. In fact, well, it's in one of the later steps, like around step 4, and I'll mention this again. But here, we're sitting in our dining room, meeting with the company who we think we're gonna contract with, and the person's telling us this and that and the other thing, telling us about the loan and all the steps we have to go through on getting a loan and stuff. And at that point, he says something about the documentation. So had we not been able to get a hold of that documentation and to find the person who knew where it was, everything would have been stopped. And it took months to get to the point, and maybe, I don't know if you've done this, but once you start looking for a contractor, you have to think of who you might want, and then you have to get on the schedule. And that schedule was like 3 or 4 months out. That's why the whole thing took like a year. So anyway, all those steps are written right here for you. So I'm telling you, sort of wait. So I really, on this first thing where it says mass save, the biggest thing I'm focused on is that documentation. You have to do all the work that they say, and you have to get it approved, and you have to get that documentation.
And this is on insulating and doing the things to
Right.
prep for it. This is before you even get the contractor for the heat pump itself. So
Bingo.
all the air sealing and insulation that they,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Okay, so step 2. The Center for Eco-Technology, or the CET, for our house, CET actually did that inspection. And luckily, I had an email from them and had the name of the person who had done the inspection. And so that was the email that I had to go back and find. So they actually were put on the job of doing the inspection by Mass Save. So we didn't have to find them. Mass Save sent them to us to do the inspection. And that's one of the things that I want to say. In this whole process, all of a sudden somebody would get in touch with us. Yet one more group, one more agency would get in touch with us. It's like, how did they get our names? How did they know about this? But we needed what they had to give. So the truth is, it's part of why it seems like science fiction. I don't know all the magic that, persons see. How did that person C know to get in touch with us? I don't know, but anyway, I still have my steps here. Wait, since I did not know to ask, okay, same thing here. Am I past my time? Is that what that is? All right. So step 3. Step 3 is this Green Energy Consumer Alliance. Again, they just got in touch with us. And my guess is that they get names of people like us who have started the process, and then they connected with us. Well, I had never heard of them before, but they are really quite marvelous. They have programs that you know, we haven't used them for months. But they were pretty vital in getting us down the road of finding the right people. They still, like, I would say every couple weeks we get yet another email from them that they're putting on yet another program. Whether it's about electric cars, about chargers, about heat pumps, about this. This is an organization that's real committed to the energy, and they put on all these special, all these special internet things, all these special videos that come on. Let me make sure I tell you what, yeah, so, okay, so so here, all this stuff is new to me, I'm scared about it, I'm reading through what green energy says, and one of the things that they offer are these special like tutorials online that have to do with heat pumps. So we went on and we looked at those. Those were really some of our beginning information about all house heat pumps. We really didn't know what we were talking about. We just knew that we wanted to get into all house heat pumps. So it was in watching the stuff online that they had, the programs, that got us to start then getting more committed. It started giving us information about just some of the lingo that was used, just some of what would it be entail. You know, they mentioned the funding and everything, but it was so much information, it was really hard to take all of it in. But it was because of watching their videos that it really pushed us forward. Well, in the course of getting familiar with looking through their emails, one comes up that has to do with an organization called Abode. And they say that they're partnering with Abode, and what Abode will do is come to your house and do some more investigation about what it is you need. Okay, so now go to step 4. So Abode was really fascinating. It was all online, but we had to make an appointment with one of their consultants, and the consultant spent, I don't know, maybe an hour with us, and asked us all kinds of information about the house, about the square footage, about the duct system, and so really gathered a lot of information, which then that person used to make recommendations to us. That person explained to us about different types of heat pumps, about the hybrid system, and again, even in the course of preparing to talk to you tonight in reviewing, for me, a lot of this stuff, I had read it all before, but all of a sudden I started taking it in a little bit different, you know, because I had some familiarity with what it was saying. So this Abode helped kick all this in gear. And Abode went through and with this information wrote down this very specific technical information saying this is the size heat pump that you would need. These are, and it was all the technical information, or a lot of it. You know, like this is what you would be telling the contractor you want, so that they have an idea of what you're talking about. And they also said, here are numerous brands of heat pumps that are well known and that are known to be good performers. And one of the things that we learned from them is that different contractors are typically aligned with specific heat pumps, heat pump brands. So that when you are talking to a contractor, this one might be really invested in, or committed to putting in Mitsubishi. This one might be really interested in putting in a different brand or a different brand. So that was really an interesting thing, but I do want to say this to you. That information was really useful to us having a sense of what we needed, and at least I felt educated when I was then reaching out to the different contractors, because what they do is they give a recommendation of contractors in your geographic area. But those have been contractors that have been approved for something already too. So they've been through some kind of a vetting system. But then it's up to you to go through and to make appointments and to make decisions about who you're going to choose and what kind of system they're going to put in. Okay, so one of the things that several despite having all this technical information, which was really helpful, somebody else said, any contractor should come in and they should virtually do the same thing. They should know specifically in their own terms what you need so that they would know what they're working with on your house. So even though Abode did that and it was so extremely helpful, the contractors also needed to do that, which is indeed what happened. Okay, so we have this list of contractors, so I just start calling. And also emailing, would you be available, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that was interesting and kind of disappointing is in there, I was asking kind of like for a Mitsubishi or this or that, because that's what Abode had recommended. And some of the contractors would write back and say, we don't do Mitsubishi, and the end of that, didn't even pursue it. Okay, so you have to go and find a contractor, and that's just kind of a grueling process that you have to go through. All right, so we found a contractor, and who is Alpine. So now I'm on step 6, and our contractor it's like Alpine is the company that we worked with, and then they contracted with the people who were the installers. Alpine, and I don't know if all contractors help to this extent, but Nancy will be sending out, I asked Alpine if I could send you some of the emails that they sent to us, because one of the services that Alpine did was they really walked us through the financial steps. And Alpine said, this is what's going to happen. We're going to meet with you, which they did. Somebody came to our house and spent, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, looking through the house, looking at the size of the ducts, looking, just doing a real thorough job, and then talking with us about what they were going to recommend. And then talk to us about saying, here's going to be the process. One of the things that Alpine did, and you'll get a document, you'll get this document that you'll see, and it's too much to review tonight, and listen, but it's like, first you have to do this step. You have to apply for a heat loan. And once you do that, then we'll set up, an appointment. Well, one of the things too is altogether, and we were going to need both our heat pump and we were going to need some electric work on our electric panel to be able to have sufficient service to make sure, like we would have been okay, but it would have used every ounce of our electricity. If there was anything else we wanted, like perhaps a car charger, or we dry our clothes on lines and stuff. We don't have a clothes dryer. If we wanted to put in a clothes dryer, we wouldn't be able to put in a clothes dryer. So anyway, we had an upgrade to our electric system. So the whole thing for us was going to be, with the electric stuff, $24,000. And then we were going to get that rebate, $10,000. And then, when we signed up, we were talking to the contractor. In order for the contractor to agree to start, we had to put a down payment down of half of the money. So we had to put a down payment down for $10,000. Well, we really scrimp and save all the time. But we were lucky that we had that money in our bank. If we hadn't, we would have had to go and start a loan process to be able to have that down payment, because they weren't going to start the whole process until they had that down payment. So I'm telling you, the money part is pretty tough. Okay, so what we did was, luckily we had that $10,000. But then right away, what we started doing was looking for, only certain banks will fund the no interest loans for the heat pumps. So they told us some banks that they would recommend. We happened to go to Greenfield Co-op, but we had to do just regular loan stuff. But in order for that to happen, they needed to have the paperwork that said, in fact, we're going through this whole process to get our heat pump, and we're gonna hire a contractor, and this is what the contract fee would be. So see, all this stuff starts getting intertwined. This has been quite an ordeal, I'll tell you what. But our house is warm, our house is comfortable. That's the point. And you know what, ethically, we feel really good about having done this, despite the fears and everything. So let me just see. Okay, so again, so step 7 on here has to do with, oh man, see, that darn it starts with required official documentation of completion of mass saves work. That documentation that I started talking about, that is so key. They required that half of the total down payment, payment in full. When they came to install the heat pump, so we went through all this paperwork, we did all the agreeing and everything, and then they had to schedule when that they were going to come and install everything. And so that again took like a month or 2. And the deal was that the day that the final installation was all complete, we needed to have our loan because we had to give them the check for everything right then and there. So really it's very particular. And I'm telling you, the stuff that Nancy's gonna send, you'll see the interaction in this email that Alpine had sent us. It went step by step. We're gonna come to your house and do this, and then we're gonna start this paperwork for you. We're gonna get a hold of this, we're gonna start this, and then they're gonna email you. And if you haven't seen it in 9 days, or 3 days or something, then blah, 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 and then you have to sign it here. And this next step is gonna happen. And so, I just feel lucky that we had that coaching along the way. I have no idea how I would have known all those steps. And it might be that other contractors do that same thing. So we got our heat pump, and it was done, it was installed, and it started functioning. The Thursday or Friday before our temperatures went down to -21. And we thought, in fact, we were over at Peter's house, I think. We thought, oh my God, what is going to be happening at our house tonight? Are we gonna be okay? We didn't know, and we were pretty scared. We walked in the front door, and it felt warm and toasty. And so we were so relieved and so thrilled. So we had that test by fire right away. So that's kind of the process. Again, read through this information that Nancy and Greenfield are going to send, because it will have that step by step. And for me, it would have been, in retrospect, I didn't even know to be scared about it because I didn't even know we were going to have to do it. But if I were in your shoes, I would look at it so I was prepared to kind of know. So I am going to tell you that we've had a bit of a glitch, and I'm going to tell you about it because ethically I think I need to. And because these heat pumps, they're so new and so different. When the Alpine guy James came to our house and spent this hour and a half or 2 hours, he was saying that because of all the difficulties, we've had after the pandemic and getting supplies and stuff, Alpine typically would service and install Mitsubishi, which is what we really wanted, and it has a fantastic reputation. And they were not available. And they said instead that they had another brand that they thought was kind of like equivalent to Mitsubishi, and it was not as familiar in this country, and it's called a Green. Well, we have since had some difficulty with it, and they're still working on figuring out the difficulty and what that is. And it seems like this close, and somebody from not the company, because it's made in China, actually. The big company, you know, that is overseeing the sales of that tree is gonna be coming to our house with our installers on Thursday so that we can get more information and they can figure it out. But it apparently has to do with the amount of refrigerant that's in the unit, and it's very, very particular, so that it's like, in these units, they're so advanced, and they're so modern, and they're so technologically involved, that it's like, things are so precise. And it's partly what's confusing, like even the thermostat that we have, that's coordinated with the unit, the thermostat is like so precise. So it keeps the house at that exact temperature, and if the temperature changes like by 1 degree, it starts dealing with things. So on our old unit, you know how it would be, with our natural gas, every once in a while the house would feel a little bit chilly, particularly as we've gotten older, and so we would go and we would punch the thermostat and put it up 1 degree. It's like you don't mess with these things that way. You don't mess with them that way. And one of the things that in fact Nancy had casually mentioned that I heard was the most cost-effective way to deal with these kinds of heating systems is to don't change from warm during the day and cool it down at night. Because the energy that it takes to go from the cooler nighttime temperature up to the daytime, they really work hard to do that. And it makes it more expensive than if you just keep it steady. There's so much to learn. Luckily Travis is going to have a lot of that kind of good information for you. So,
Where's Steve?
yes.
It's your neighbor, Al.
Yeah, hi Al, I thought that was you.
Just, I wanted to describe a couple of quick things that are seem to be very different. I'm having a heat pump installed in about 2 weeks. I went to a neighbor and asked him who installed yours. He told me. I then called that local contractor. It's actually an oil company, not the one here in Greenfield. And the contractor came to my house, did all the measurements, said what kind of unit, what kind of BTUs it should be. They wanted to do a Mitsubishi and so forth. And then they told me call Mass Save because you have to do blah blah blah. I called Mass Save and they said no, you don't. You're not doing. Everything you just described is a whole system, whole house system. I'm just doing a single mini split. And Mass Save said you don't have to call us. And the contractor called me back and said you don't have to call Mass Save. We will install it. We will give you the information that you need to get the federal and state credits. But you don't need Mass Save at all. Has anybody else experienced that? Because I'm not using Mass Save.
Yeah, that's the home performance contractor I was talking about.
Right. But there's no Mass Save in this equation.
Well, they're the one, they give you the money. I can tell you that much.
No, I'm not asking them for money.
Oh, you're not? Okay.
I need the state rebate and I need the federal rebate, which are now different starting since January. And I don't think people necessarily, Nancy, need Mass Save.
It's an interesting perspective. I guess it just depends on whether you want that $10,000 rebate, and if you think you're going to get that level of rebate from those other people, go for it.
No, I'm sorry, the 10,000 rebate is standard whole house.
That's correct.
I'm not a whole house. A lot of people.
Yeah, no, and Mass Save will only give you $2,500 if you're a partial house. But okay, well let's move on, and then we're going to have a lot more question and answer at the back.
We can't ask, do you have a local installer, or did they come from out of state?
No, they're all in state. Alpine is down in Hadley, and then the installers are, like one of the guys lives in Amherst, like that. I'm not sure where the other, but they're all, if you want to call Amherst local, pretty local.
Yeah, no, that's I can.
Yeah. So one thing about what Al is kind of mentioning, and I think my time is maybe up. So after this whole thing is installed, then right away, again, inspectors come and inspectors are asking. And even though I haven't been working directly with Mass Saves through any of this whole process, Mass Save, somebody that's connected with, and it's kind of down here at the very, very bottom of the 7, this thing that's called MAHT loan, and that says clear results, but they're kind of through Mass Save. But they're all of a sudden sending stuff like, okay, so sign this thing that says you've done this, and you're gonna, you've done all the steps, you've gotten the loans, and then they're the ones that the rebate finally comes through. I think the $10,000 and maybe the $2,500, for the mini splits comes through them finally too. But, initially they thought that it would take about 6 weeks to get that money. Now they're saying that it takes months to get that money because so many people have applied. So I guess if I think in terms of the whole process continuing, I guess if part of the process is to have that money in my hand, I guess it's going to take more than a year to go through the whole thing.
So you don't have the money yet?
Don't have the money yet.
Travis does it.
But Travis does.
Thank you, Wisty. Thanks so much, Wisty. That's quite a travel and an experience that you've had. So Travis is going to be speaking next. Travis Drury and his wife, Sarah Brown and Anson, they moved to Greenfield and bought a home about 2 years ago. And Travis had a very different story about how things moved on, since they wanted to do a lot of home renovations at the time, as well as the insulating and changing their heating system. So they started before the process of before the $10,000 rebate was announced, and so they really had a different thing. So Travis is a water quality scientist, and he acted as his own contractor. And he pulled Mass Save in where it was financially advantageous. And you may have met him around town because he's the chair of the Community Preservation Commission, as well as the chair of the Conservation Commission. So, Travis, and I think you're probably going to say this, Travis, and Sarah, they were motivated not only by their desire to do something environmentally appropriate, but also to improve the air quality in their house. So, Travis.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I guess I'll just start by saying that this process might be a little bit different, partially because of when we started. Like Nancy said, we started before the 10,000 rebate for a whole house heat pump was even announced. We didn't even know that was going to happen. And so I think we were kind of ahead of the game. So there wasn't all this backlog with all the contractors. But yeah, that was our house that you just saw there. Heating oil to heat pump, and that's our 120-year-old house, built 1902 in Greenfield.
Excuse me.
Yes.
When did the $10,000 appear to people?
I'll get to when the 10,000 came up in my presentation, actually. So here's a little background on what our house was before. As I said, it's 120 years old. We had an oil furnace with forced hot air, and I'll just say that when we moved into the house, the oil furnace kind of smelled like burning oil when it was on, which it's not supposed to do, even after we had it serviced. So that kind of gets into the air quality stuff. We did have vents, our forced hot air vents downstairs and in the bathroom upstairs, but we also had 2 bedrooms that only had electric baseboard heaters in them. And in the summer, during the heat waves, the only thing we had was this small little window air conditioner that we put in one window in our house. So another reason for doing this for us was to get the air conditioning in the summer. Climate change, it's going to get hotter, there's going to be more heat waves, and we're in it for the long haul, so we wanted the air conditioning. And we also did already have a decent amount of insulation in our attics and our outer walls in our house. A previous owner had insulated those at some point as well, so that was a good start. So this is kind of an overview of the whole timeline. I'm going to go through some of these steps step by step, but basically from 2020, August 2020 is when we bought our house, and then April 2022 is when we got our rebate check. So we did get that $10,000 check in the mail. I got it out of the envelope, and I felt like, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, like, oh, I got a golden ticket here. But yeah, so September 2020, we did our home energy assessment, and this was before we even knew we wanted a heat pump. We just wanted, better insulation, and we just bought this house and figured we might as well get whatever we can. And at that time, they were offering totally free insulation and draft sealing, so that's what we got in January of 2021. And then we started thinking about heat pumps, and started gathering quotes July through October 2021. Then November 2021 through January, we were finalizing the plans for exactly what we wanted to do, and we were waiting for our oil tank to run out of oil and then switch it over like right then, so we weren't wasting any oil that we already had. January 2022, applied and received the heat loan. Immediately before February 2022, that's when our heat pump was installed, along with the heat pump hot water heater, which isn't necessary for the project, but we needed it, and I'll get to that in a second. So then late February, I did a bunch of insulating of our ducts in our basement myself, which was fairly cheap, but very time consuming, I'll say. And then March 2022, applied for the rebate. April, got the rebate. So it only took us like a month to get the rebate, but I think now things are a lot slower. And then now I'm analyzing 1 full year of data, which I'm a data nerd and I do data stuff for work, so I was very excited to do that. So yeah, this is just a look at, this was our old forced hot air oil furnace. I think it was installed in like 1983 or something like that. And then our oil tank on the right. And so I kind of took pictures of the processes as they were going on just to document them because it was interesting to me. This was when we got our insulation installed. They had the blow-in insulation going up into our attic. They went in our basement, did the air sealing under the floor. And then, as I said, when we started collecting the quotes, we actually ended up, it took months, but we ended up getting quotes from 5 different contractors, and they really varied a lot. A lot of them were saying, oh, we could replace your oil furnace with a new oil furnace and then also put in mini splits. And they were saying, we could put 2 mini splits downstairs, 1 upstairs, or maybe, 1 downstairs in this room, 1 upstairs, or, then there was another idea of maybe having a ducted one in the basement that would be for downstairs, and then a ducted one in the attic for the upstairs. But that didn't even qualify for any mass save rebates because of the way it worked. And then some of the companies wanted to totally replace all of the ducting in our house to make it like as maximum efficient as it could, which if we had unlimited money, maybe we would, because some of our ducting, apparently it's more efficient if your vent is blowing directly under your window, because then it creates like a heat pocket in your house. And some of ours, they would have to move. And anyway, it would have been a whole big thing. So our quotes varied, from the low end, $8,000 just for like a couple mini splits, all the way up to $24,500 with the total ducting reworking. So then the quote that we did select was actually Arctic here in Greenfield. And it was $12,500 for our central ducted heat pump to replace our furnace. And they also removed the oil furnace and the oil tank once the oil ran out. Then again, I'll just say some of these prices might be different now. This was, before there was a big demand, I think, for central heat pumps. So I think even Arctic probably cost more than this at this time. But and then they also, it was $2,300 to get ducting upstairs into the bedrooms. And this was actually the Jim at Arctic. His idea was to run it up through the chimney into the attic and then down into the bedrooms that didn't have ducting in them already, or any vents, in those rooms. And that was why we had to replace our water heater, because it was venting into the chimney along with the oil furnace. So, and it was getting a little old anyway, and we figured, what the heck, we'll just do it all at the same time. So we got a heat pump water heater at the same time. So our total cost there was $17,800, and we were expecting $12.50 per ton for a 3-ton system. So we were expecting a $3,750 rebate at the time. So then that winter, 2021 to 2022, we had purchased a full tank of oil like at the end of winter the previous year. So we just had to wait for it to run out, and we kept checking it and checking it and checking it. And then when it started getting like below a quarter, he had me like use a stick and start like marking on the stick, and we were like really counting down. I was keeping track of the dates, and I had a graph in Excel and everything. It was fun. And it was like in constant communication with him, like, okay, this is how much we have left. When can we do it? When can we do it? So if you go to the next slide, then January, right before we were about to do this, that's when MassSave proposed an increase to, for a whole house heat pump to $10,000. And at this point, we weren't sure if we were going to get the old rebate or the new rebate, because we were kind of right on the line, and they were proposing this one, but it hadn't been like finalized yet. So it was a little touch and go there, not knowing, potentially almost missing out on the 10,000. So then in January, like I said, our oil was pretty low. It was almost running out, and so we applied for the heat loan. Talking with Arctic, that's when they were like, okay, go ahead and apply for the heat loan. I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I think the work has to be done within either 60 or 90 days after you apply for the heat loan, or after you receive the heat loan. So it does have to be pretty close to when the installation is going to happen. And then February 2022, I was taking pictures of them installing it. One of the things we were a little worried about was like, okay, it's February and it's cold outside, and you're going to disconnect our furnace and then reconnect the new one. And so what they actually came out and they installed the compressor outside one day, and then ran all the tubing and everything, and we were still using our oil furnace. And then the next day they came back and just shut off the furnace, swapped it out, put the new one in. And then just like Wisty, you can see all our ducting there, and those were like our original ducts at that point. But you can also see this one kind of going into our chimney, and that's where it goes upstairs to the second floor. So then the really important part that Wisty kind of touched on all this too was right after it was installed, if you're getting a whole house heat pump rebate, the contractor has to sign a whole home heat pump verification form, which basically just says, yes, we removed the old one, or it's only going to be used for emergencies, the old furnace, and install the new one. And that has to be done in order to get that whole house rebate. And then also I did the heat loan verification form. Basically, you just go online and you take some pictures of what was installed, and then they're like, okay, that's good. And after that, we paid the invoice, and once you get that invoice that says, yes, you paid for this, then you can go on MassSave's website and submit that along with some photos for the rebate. And as I said, then the next month, the $10,000 check came in the mail, and it was a very good day. And also, like I said, so you can have, like a contractor could, insulate all of your ducting and everything, and I will say it is a lot of work. But also I bought about $170 of materials, and it's basically like the lowest end insulation you can get for ducting. It's basically like bubble wrap with like foil on it. But you can get like really intense insulation too. But I went through and insulated all of our ducting in the basement. And then you can go to the next slide.
Does the air for the upstairs go through the chimney? Is it lined?
Yeah, so the question was the air for upstairs going through the chimney. What there is in the chimney is a flexible, like one of those flexible
So it's lined
things.
with a flexible piece.
Yeah, there's a flexible duct going up through it, and then what they did was they plugged above where that is to outside with a whole bunch of insulation, so there's no cold air coming down through the chimney.
Does rain come down through it?
No, we have a cap. That was another, I forgot to mention that on here, but we did get a cap put on our chimney too, and that was a completely different contractor, you know,
So
to
if
do
you were
that.
getting the roof redone, you could get your chimney eliminated above the roof?
Yeah, we could get it removed. I mean, we have a slate roof, and the slate roof guy said it could last another 100 years, so I'm hoping to not have to do that, but yeah. Okay, so a year later, that brings us, oh, we have a question
I
here.
got a question. With this setup, the way you insulated your ductwork, what do you get for heat in the cellar?
So,
Does it take away from the heat?
yeah. So the question is, how do we get heat in the cellar? So our old system actually had a vent like on the side of the ducting in the basement that you could open or close, so you could get heat into the basement that way. And they asked me, they're like, do you want us to put this back in? Because they had to replace that part. And I was like, yeah, might as well, just in case we need it. So they did put that on there, and I have it like pretty much closed all the way. And it's like a cold basement, concrete
But
floor.
don't you lose heat on your floors by having a cold basement?
Yeah, I mean, our basement was cold before, so I guess we were just used to it. But
Well, you had an oil burner down there, so you
Yeah,
could
you
put,
get some heat from the furnace in there.
yeah, they're saying that
and
we.
the whole chimney was hot because you were.
That's true. That's true. But I will say, so they're asking, I'm just mentioning for the recording what you're saying about losing heat in the basement and the chimney. I will say that as Wisty was saying, like with the heat pump system, it runs a lot more often, but it doesn't put out as much heat. And the house is really more of a constant temperature at all times. Like, we definitely noticed not feeling like cold spots in the house because it's running so often that it's circulating the air. And so, before with the old oil furnace, it would run and it would be like super warm, and then, it takes a while, and then it starts to get cold and chilly. It's chilly in this corner of the room and chilly over there. And we don't really notice that anymore at all. It's just like a constant temperature everywhere because it's constantly circulating. So I would say it feels more comfortable to me now than it did before. Although potentially our floors are a little colder, but I wear slippers in the winter, so you can deal with it.
The chimney used to take air out of the cellar, and now it doesn't, right? So
That's true. Yeah.
So the cellar is tighter, I guess, by not having that chimney air pulling through all the time.
That's true.
But
Yeah,
now
less.
You're drying it out somewhat with a heat pump, hot water heater, right?
Yes, we're drying the air in the cellar with the heat pump hot water heater, and Mass Save did the like air sealing in the basement, so there's a lot less cold air coming in from outside too. So I don't know, and then also the hot water heater is making it colder in the basement because it's pumping the air from the basement into our hot water. It's pumping the heat from the basement into the hot water.
Well, a lot of that is latent energy in the moisture if you've got any moisture, so.
Yeah. So anyway, it's it's one of those things like it really depends on your specific situation, I think, for a lot of these things. Over a year later, that's where we are now. Looking at our electric usage data, I was trying to come up with an estimate of how much electricity we're using just for our heating and cooling per month. And so what I did was I took our total electric usage per month, and then I subtracted the lowest amount of kilowatt hours that we used per month before our heat pump went in. And just to remind you, we didn't own the house for a super long time before we put it in, so we didn't have like a lot of information on that. So I subtracted that, and then I also subtracted an estimate for the new heat pump hot water heater, like how much electricity that's supposed to use per month. That was from like the Energy Star website. And so then that estimate was what I was using for how much electricity was purely from heating or cooling. And it's just an estimate. There are error bars there. And then I wanted to compare this with our oil furnace, which it was kind of hard to get an idea of how much oil we used because, some of it was bought and we didn't use it, and some of it was bought at the end of the year. But I think we used about 490 gallons of oil in the winter of 2020 to 2021, which was the last full winter before doing this. So if you look at it, this is a little complicated, but along the bottom, you'll see each month. And then on the left bar is our oil, when we were using oil. And then the right bar is when we had the heat pump. And the red is our electric usage that's not heating and cooling. The yellow is our gas, because our water heater before was natural gas. And so that went down. And then you have the blue, which is, this is all cost in dollars. So the blue is heating and cooling, oil versus heat pump. And so one of the things you'll notice at first is like, well, wait a minute, it looks like we paid more for the heat pump, like through the winter. But if you go to the next slide, so it ended up that, 2020 to 2021 when we were on oil versus when we used the heat pump, we actually did pay a little more that month, or that year, for our heating costs and total utilities. But if you go to the next slide. So if you remember, when we were buying that oil was $1.79 to $2.54 per gallon. That's what I got from our receipts. So that oil was very cheap compared to what the oil was this year. And then, it's also another gray area because our electric rates in Greenfield, with the Greenfield Light and Power, the electric rates didn't go up like a lot of people's did. So it's kind of comparing apples and oranges, and it'd be nice to have like 10 years of data on oil and then 10 years of data on heat pump, but I don't have that. So right here, you can see this was average oil prices that I found, on the Massachusetts state website through this past winter. So using those numbers, I did the graph again, and this is the same amount of electricity usage, the same amount of oil, just with those different oil prices from 2020 to this winter. And you can see the oil was a lot more expensive. And I'll also note, in the summer, there is a little bump there in the summer where we're using our heat pump for electricity, but it was only about $160 total for the whole year for like the air conditioning for the whole summer. So it wasn't very much. So if you go to the next slide, so using those numbers for the heating oil, then the estimate is we saved about $1,000 on heating costs. So it's one of those things that it's kind of hard to say if you're going to save money, if you're going to spend a little extra. It all depends on what the electricity rates do. If you're on oil, what the oil rates do, or natural gas. It's really hard to tell. But as Nancy was saying, and like Wisty, one of the big reasons for us was the carbon emissions. So I estimated, those same graphs again, but estimating this time, instead of cost, how much carbon dioxide is produced for heating oil, natural gas, or the electricity production. And I'll just say the number for electricity production here is from the Greenfield Light and Power disclosure form. And Greenfield Light and Power is supposed to be 100% renewable, and I'm not exactly sure if this number is actually our electricity or what the grid in Massachusetts is. I'm a little unsure about that number, but that's, I don't know if that applies to Greenfield specifically or the state, but using these numbers, if we make that graph again, you can see again, on the left is the oil, and on the right is the heat pump, and this time it's in pounds of carbon dioxide per month that was put out. So drastically less for the heat pump on the right side of those two bars. And if you go to the next, so you can see this was the estimate from that, was that when we were using heating oil, it was about 11,000 pounds of carbon dioxide released. and then going to the heat pump about 3,400. So it was about a 70% reduction in carbon emissions from heating. And then, looking at all of our utilities, it was about a 53% reduction because there's still that electric part, that we were using no matter what, and still a little gas too. We have a gas stove, so the other thing is, it'll only get better, that difference between heat pumps and oil or natural gas, because Massachusetts has a target for net zero emissions by 2050, and the electricity production is set to get greener and greener. 53% less. The goal is 53% reduction in emissions compared to 1990 by 2025, and then 70% reduction in 2030. So that's for electricity generation. So if you're using electricity, you should be using less and less, having less and less carbon emissions over time as our grid gets greener. So yeah, just a summary of all that. We added heating to those 2 bedrooms. We added cooling to the whole house, which definitely makes our house a lot more comfortable, and more evenly heated and cooled, as I was saying before. And it was a huge estimated carbon emissions reduction. And in that first year, I'm estimating we saved about $1,000, but it could about break even some years. Maybe we'll pay a little bit more, maybe we'll pay a little bit less some years, I don't know. And then my final point here is that the rebates are real, because I did get that check. So I know that it can happen. So don't despair, I guess.
And your comfort level in the house is up too, you're saying, so that's, have numbers for that, but.
Yeah, the question is about comfort levels. Yeah, again, we're keeping the thermostat at the same temperature at all times. We actually did, in the beginning, have a small, reduction in heat at night, and then, brought it back up. But it's definitely, I think it is more efficient keeping it at one temperature, and so we're just keeping it at one temperature. And like I said, for the heating, the air that comes out, like, it almost feels cool if you just put your hand over it. It feels like cool air, but it's just because it's like barely heating your house, just like a little bit, just keeping it right at that same level. So, there's not like a big heat wave and then a cold front coming through your house, is what it feels like. And there's a question over here.
So there's a whole big thermostat system that's got to be put in somewhere, right? To keep things as evenly as you're talking about?
Yeah, so basically all that we did was, for the thermostat was the question, we had an older electronic thermostat, and they just replaced it with, a fancier one that can run with the heat pumps. And there are systems you can get where there are thermostats throughout your house, or you could have zone heating, and it gets very complicated, but ours is just a straight, one thermostat, set it to one temperature. I will say, if you want to get really into the fiddling with things, a lot of times with vents, you can get dampers in your vents where you can kind of partially close off a vent and to a room, and then if maybe one room's getting more heat than another one, you could partially close that one off, and then maybe it's more evenly heated overall. So I don't know. I've been playing with that sort of thing because I think it's fun.
You have been working on balancing it, because right now you just have one thermostat. So
yeah. Yeah, I've done some balancing, and part of that was to upstairs. We were getting a lot of, because it's upstairs and heat rises, I wanted less air going to the vents upstairs.
I beg to differ. Heat does not rise.
Okay.
It radiates, but
it
hot
radiates.
air convects, so it's a different.
Yeah.
And hot air rises.
It sounds, hot air rises. How about that? Yeah, another question.
And just another thing, you must be really happy to have the big oil tank out, and the safety and your air cleaner in the whole house?
Yeah, definitely good to have the oil tank out. I actually, after this was done, I kind of totally reworked our basement, and we have storage there now, and I think at one point there was like oil leaking out of that previously, and so we don't have to worry about that anymore. And then when they removed our oil tank, they removed the pipe to outside and insulated that hole so that there wasn't cold air coming in, and so that there's not a pipe so that someone accidentally adds oil to it, because I saw a news story about that where someone still had the pipe but no oil tank, and it accidentally got oil in it and filled their basement. So didn't want that to happen. Yeah.
We have a 200-year-old house.
Mm.
We do not have ducts. There are 6 fireplaces that are not usable as fireplaces. So they are basically, just sending heat, even though they're blocked, not blocked hugely well. Both Wisty and you had ducts already.
Yeah.
In a situation like ours, we would have to add a complete duct system, is that right?
Yeah, so you can either do a full ducted system. So the question was, if you don't have air ducts in your house, you can either add ducting throughout your house and have a forced hot air system like this, or you can go with mini splits and have different mini splits throughout the house in different zones. Technically, I'll just add, if you have forced hot water, there are heat pumps that can heat, hot water radiators. I mean, you don't have that, but I'm just pointing that out for anyone else. So there are different ways that heat pumps can work, and I actually have a friend who doesn't have any ducting in their house, and they're going through the process, and they're going to put in mini splits throughout their house. So that's kind of like you get a bunch of little heat pumps, in different parts of the house. And that was what most of the contractors recommended to us, was like, well, it's a lot easier, just like, put a mini split upstairs in the hallway, put one in your living room, one in the dining room, and then that'll pretty much heat your house. But I was like, I really wanted that whole house. Even before the rebate, I was like, I really wanted that whole house, because we already have the ducting to most of the rooms. Like, just have one central system, and that's what I wanted to go with, yeah.
Do you have outside air at all? Do you have a little outside air going into there, or is it just totally circulating through the house?
Sorry, could you clarify? Outside air coming into where?
Your heating duct system. Is there any,
Fresh air?
yeah, is there any outside fresh air into,
From outside the house?
Yeah,
No.
but
No.
you do have exhaust fans for the kitchen and bathrooms?
For the bathroom we do. For the kitchen, that's a project we have yet to install that we definitely want. But we do not have an exhaust fan in there. But yeah, I mean, pretty much it's just recycling the air in the house. And
Your old furnace took in air from the outside, didn't it? It had an air supply of some sort, maybe just a leaky cellar?
I mean, maybe the leaky cellar was an outside air source, but other than that, there wasn't anything where air was coming in from outside.
But Travis, what are those big fans doing that are outside?
So the question is, what are the big fans doing outside? So the big fans are blowing air. Again, I'm not an engineer, and I'm not an HVAC expert, but basically the big fans are blowing air across these coils outside, and then those coils are, there's a compressor out there, and those coils are heating liquid, and then it's pumping this liquid refrigerant into your house that's warmer now, and then it goes through other coils inside your house where the air is circulating through the house past those coils and picking up that heat. And then it goes back outside to get heated up again. And then in the summer, when you have the air conditioning, then it flips the other way, and it takes the heat from inside your house and pumps it outside.
So did your old air furnace have a humidifier on it, or?
No, our old furnace did not have any humidifier or dehumidifier. It was very dry in the winter, and that's, our current system doesn't have a whole house humidifier on it, but it can be used as a whole house dehumidifier. And you can get, you can get systems, like a humidifier system installed into your ducting so it'll blow that throughout the house. We don't have one, but you can do that.
What kind of maintenance is required for that?
For the humidifier?
No, well,
Oh.
no, for what you have now in your
Mm.
house. I mean,
Yeah, the question is about maintenance. So we've had it a year. We haven't really had to do anything other than, the outside compressor, you're supposed to basically clean the grates on it because, it's sucking in a lot of air and then blowing it out the fan. So you're supposed to clean those grates. And I mean, I think you're supposed to have someone check your refrigerant levels at some point, but just in case there was a leak or something.
do you have air filters in it? Like the old one?
Yeah, there's actually it's a thick air filter. It's like this thick and like this wide and that big. So it's
Electrostatic or just a one that you change?
it's one that you change.
Okay,
Yeah. But we got one that's like there's like a bunch of different levels of air filters you can get.
Yeah, so it's real fine.
Yeah.
But that
yeah.
just means you have to change it that more often, right?
Yeah. Actually ours, it says you only have to change it every 6 months is what it says.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Any other questions? I'm happy to answer his questions all night, but if anyone else has
Or
questions.
for Wisty, if you have other questions for her, ask away.
And I will say, so there was a question earlier about just getting a mini split, and I was looking at, as you were answering that question, I was looking, and there are partial home rebates, per ton for a mini split. So I think you can still, again, I'm not a massive expert or anything, but I think you can get a massive rebate for just putting in one mini split. It's just not the whole house rebate, it's just a smaller rebate.
Does anybody know if you have to go through all the Mass Save house assessment to get one mini split?
That question the question was if you have to go through that whole process to get one mini split. I would assume so. Nancy's nodding her head yes. Yeah, question right here.
Well, we've had 2 mini splits installed about 8 years ago. Wait a minute. Yeah, it was about 8 years ago. Time flies. And we had to make sure we had the Mass Save audit before, and we dealt with Sandries, and they were great. They did pretty much all the ins and outs, applying for the rebates and everything. They had all that in order. So, and they were, I think with the Mitsubishi, they gave an extra because they were, I think, a diamond dealer or something, and they were able to give a better warranty on the product. But you have to have them cleaned every year, and it's call around and find out because it's expensive. If you have a furnace cleaned, you figure that's like one bill, maybe $150, $200. Well, if you have 2 mini splits, you've got to double that. And it's a little bit more than just what you have a furnace cleaned. The rate is higher. So at least that's what we found.
Yeah.
So,
That's
So just to repeat for the camera then, you did have 2 mini splits installed and you did go through the Mass Save process.
yes, and I would like to get a third one because we never had one put upstairs. So that's why I'm here tonight, to find out about, is it possible to get the rebates if you are putting in a third one?
Yeah, and I would assume that it is, and I'm not sure if that would make it, like if you're using that for your only heating source, or if you're not using it for your only heating source now, and then you are using it for your only heating source, I'm not sure how that would apply to like the whole house thing, but.
We are using it for our whole heat
Yeah.
source, and we are using very little oil because we still have an oil hot water heater. And so, I don't know, it's just, wonderful. And it's great in the summer because it's cooling, and the winter, I think they're good to something like 20 below. I mean, it was amazing to me, these have really improved. The ones that are sold now are probably even better than the ones that we bought. We bought Mitsubishi, I think it was 8 years ago.
Yeah, and I guess from my experience, when I was doing this back in 2021, I was calling Mass Save and getting answers to some of these questions. It sounds like it's a little harder to get a hold of someone at Mass Save these days. So, I mean, that was kind of how, I kind of leaned on them. You know, I called Mass Save, I don't know, half a dozen times probably during our process, and always talk to somebody, but, yeah, question here.
I'm curious, in order to qualify for the $10,000 rebate, does it have to be your primary residence?
Does it have to be your primary residence?
Yes.
Someone said yes. That's a question I'm not sure about, but I heard yes in the
I
audience.
got a duplex and I was told that I would qualify on both sides.
Okay.
So I'm living in one and I would qualify on both sides.
So you can qualify for a duplex if you live on one side.
That's what I was told.
But that might be different than like a separate
Well,
household.
what if you put one in each, your unit and the other place? Can you get it both 2 times?
Yeah, exactly. I get the $10,000 rebate twice. And
Great.
2 loans.
Thank you.
I got a question on that rebate with Mass Save. Is it the same amount, the 10,000, for a heat pump system or say 2 mini splits? Is there a difference? What's the difference?
I think it can only be up to the total cost of the system getting installed. So if your 2 mini splits happen to be $9,000 to install them, then I think you'd only get $9,000.
But they do qualify without being the whole house heat?
They qualify for the whole house only if you're using them as your primary heating source.
Okay.
And any other heating source you have to verify, or you have to sign a thing saying that you would only use it in like emergency situations.
Now, do they have a mini split that will heat your up? I have a single story ranch. Do they have a mini split that will heat that cellar and cool it and upstairs together as one, or do you have to have 2 different things? Do you know that?
So the question was about having a heat pump upstairs and heating your cellar. I mean, where the heat pump is where the air blows out. So if you wanted to have one heating in your cellar, I think you'd have to have another head.
You have a head, but you can't get them? Is that available?
Or if there were there are
Yes.
ducted mini splits
So,
too.
so there's options. You could have
Yeah.
one outside unit with multiple heads,
Yeah,
2, 3, 4, whatever.
right.
But you could also have a air handler in the cellar that would do the first floor, and you could have an opening in the cellar that would do the cellar, right?
Yeah, so there's so you would just.
Well, there's a variation on it
Yeah.
to match whatever.
Yeah, question.
Yeah, I have a scheduled energy audit next month. Should I start the process for calling contractors, or should I wait?
Yeah, so the question was, energy audit coming up, start the process for contractors. I'm not sure about the timeline on how long things are happening these days, but it probably wouldn't hurt to contact some contractors. I'm not sure how long it'll take to get the insulation and air sealing done also. Nancy's got a comment.
The thing that I hear, one of the biggest problems with heat pumps and is that they're sized incorrectly. So you need the specifications like you were talking about, Wisty. So you need to know what is the heat load of your house. And you don't know that before and the insulation has happened. At least I think it would be hard to calculate, to imagine, but I don't know.
I wanted to make a comment about, I want to make a comment about should you contact the contractor? They're well aware of how long it's going to take them. So I would suggest you contact them and let them say whether or not it's too early. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, and they'll tell you what the roadblocks are.
Yeah.
If you need more electric in your panel or.
Yeah, that reminds me, we also upgraded our electric line to a 200 amp line, but we did that totally unrelated to this project. It was because our line outside was like fraying and dangerous, and we were like, well, we might as well replace it with a stronger one anyway. So that was thousands more dollars on top of everything that we did here, and I kind of forgot about it because it was a separate project.
But that's another thing that we might need to look into as well.
I have a question for the heat pump person. So we don't have a duct system either. What I've heard is that when it's super cold, if that's your primary heat, that it can be too cold. And so my question to you is, are you comfortable even when we have 20 below?
I think this year, we didn't have a really cold winter, so we didn't have to turn on the oil, which we only use as backup.
Yeah.
Maybe one day for oil. Last year, it was maybe a week or two. And my husband likes the oil because he feels that it's coming from the floor through the baseboard. The mini split, the air is coming, you know, up high.
Right.
So we have to make sure the vents are geared. And everybody's different. I don't like the vents blowing right on me, especially if it's right in the dining room and I'm sitting at the table. So there's so many variables. But I found that this winter, maybe one day we turned on the oil. It was amazing.
So I don't know if anybody else has experience with that.
Yeah, well, I'll add that there's many new configurations of how the heat is brought into your house. It doesn't have to be up in the air, it can be down lower, you know, where you're more used to having it safe, maybe a little more
So
sense.
the mini splits at a lower level. You mean?
That's correct, yeah.
There's different models now, there's wall models and they're on down.
The mini splits can handle it though. The worst that would happen is instead of being 70, it's gonna be 68 in your house because if it's really cold out and really windy,
Yeah.
depending on your house, it could vary. How much the wind, it takes the heat away from your house, how leaky your windows are, your other parts of your house, your cellar. And that's why you need mass save, because they can tell you, you may have the roof fine, you may have the walls fine, but you may be losing half your heat through the floor and through the cellar. And so that's where you need to concentrate, but someone needs to point out where your major losses are.
So we've
Where
had,
low hanging fruit is what they say,
right,
right?
so we've had 2 mass save audits. We've had, our entire floor has been insulated with the mass save program. That's great. If you guys haven't done it, you should do it. It's great. Because we noticed an immediate difference in just the comfort in the house already. But we're looking to we're looking for a different primary heat source. And I'm just getting mixed information about the mini splits as your primary heat source.
Yeah, so, you do have to I think you have to really get rid of your old system in order to get that $10,000.
No.
So.
No.
Really, you don't? Okay.
You have to sign like a little check an affidavit box, basically, saying that you won't use it.
That you won't use it.
Unless it's for service
Yeah.
or.
Emergency, I mean.
I'm curious how many of you.
You have,
Hot water distribution systems?
What does that mean?
Not too many.
Right.
So in other words, who has baseboard,
Or radiant floors.
radiant floor, or it could be a baseboard hot water system,
Or
it could be
a,
a steam radiator system, something that's not like just moving air around. And so answer that question, yes.
So that's what I have, and I have a heat pump that they're gonna be putting in. They're just starting. I had to upgrade the electrical because there wasn't enough electric service, so it was a 200 amp new electric service added to the 2 100 amps we already had. So, but now the next step is happening. Now, we have all radiant floors, so the heat pump going to water will do heating, but it won't do any air conditioning. You can't cool the floors because they'd end up condensing and wet unless you're really careful. So they're gonna put some units and parts of it that will be like the mini splits but it's not truly a mini split, it's a high wall air handler. But it looks exactly like that mini split, and you have the remote control. But that will add heat, and it will also cool in the summer, which will switch.
Well, as Travis mentioned, and you're mentioning also, that they do have mini splits that go from air to water, to make hot water, so that you can, but they are tricky, and Matt, I know you've been researching this, and so if you wanted to talk and just say a few words about what you've been learning about them, because I have a radiant floor system, and
I've been hesitating to do anything.
because it's like,
There's just not that much information out there.
I don't know I haven't even started looking for contractors, but here's Matt.
Well, just before you guys, my contractors, I thought better on the geothermal, water to water, they're 25,000 or something?
Up to 40 even.
Up to 40?
If you need electrical as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, is that if you're low income, or is that in all?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it's low income only.
Right, but yes, so that's low income only, but it's 25, there's others, and I think it does include electric, and you can get zero interest loans, so.
No, I'd love to hear more about your story. I think I was here last week for the last one. I heard you speaking as well, and you had some interesting thoughts. I come from a high performance building, green building world of things with a focus on renewable energy and electrical. But I also have my hand in a number of things. And you know, everything was so much simpler when it was just, oh, well, we got these mini splits and they're fantastic. You have an outdoor unit, an indoor unit, or maybe a couple indoor units, and it solves all your problems. But as we've heard tonight with the different stories, which are fantastic, there's lots of different options, configurations. Every house is different. And my mind comes to the thought that maybe like 15, 20 years ago, a lot of folks were upgrading their heating systems when the high performance European products were coming to the US, maybe a Daris or a Beastman. Well, that was a failure, but
Nesting boilers? Really?
The gas-fired units and oil-fired units, and everybody's saying, oh, this is great, super efficient, we're saving all this fuel, we're still burning it, but we're saving it. Some of the lower mass units only take up some wall space. We can do hot water heating as well. If we wanted to, we could really shut them down in the summertime and not have as much problems as a high mass boiler trying to be shut down for summertime reduction. And everyone thought, well, these are great. These are fantastic. They're expensive, but we're getting some rebates. And we can have all this amazing hydronic heating. We've got the PEX tubing in the floor, or the panels on the wall, or the baseboards, and it's super comfortable. I've heard a number of people say a lot of folks don't necessarily enjoy having something blown on us. And I've suffered with allergies my whole life, and I know other folks, the more turbulence we have in our living space, the more likelihood that there's that little bit of pet dander that's getting caught up in your nostrils more than you'd like, or the dust bunnies. Of course, I should vacuum more too. So anyway, I just got to get the humidifier in there to keep the dust down. So I've got a property I'm working on now that has one of these gas-fired, high-performance, low-mass boilers doing domestic hot water and domestic space heating through radiant baseboards. Fantastic performing system. Again, it was one of those things that was going to be the best of the best at the time, and maybe it's the last system you ever buy, but here we are, 12 years later, and well, actually the lifespan of that is 10 to 15 years, and what are we going to do now? So I've really been looking at the options for air to water, and of course it's the same situation as 15, 20 years ago. There's all kinds of exciting things in Europe and in Japan, and there's a few that are here, but it's not as mainstream here yet. So we've got all these homes out there that have these existing infrastructure for hydronics, and people got really used to the comfortable warm floors and the baseboard heat. So how do we use the heat pump technology to do that? So I've been looking into that, talking to Nancy. I've got friends in the industry, and then I also pick up the phone or the email and just talk to manufacturers whenever something comes up. And I've done a few national webinars too, trying to see what other communities have about information that we don't quite have yet. And the one development, I don't know if you saw my email today, but I did, again, the Mass Save website, love it, but there's always something you can't find and then you find it. So I think it was a few days ago, I found on the Mass Save website, they actually do have they have these qualification lists for equipment. The equipment that meets the qualifications to use this equipment in the program and receive the incentives. And I found this little link that said, here's the link to the air to water stuff over here. And I almost missed it, and I found it. And I think there were 6 manufacturers, and I think I've only heard of 3 or 4 of them. So I'm going to be looking at the others and hopefully having more to talk about with Nancy and some of the contractors too. But just trying to see what makes sense around here for a lot of folks. In many cases, I think it is going to be simpler, more cost effective, and appropriate to do mini splits, and for many people to say goodbye to their hydronic systems in some cases. But then again, every case is different. For my case, I'm going to do as much investigation as I can now. I think I have a little bit of window of time. I'm limping my heating system along now to the point where I think I can keep it going for another couple of years if I have to, and hopefully see what equipment evolves for that, to replace that equipment. There's a company in Westfield, Spacepack, that's one of the bigger national players, and they actually have a testing laboratory where they do trainings and stuff. So I'm trying to talk to as many of the local folks as I can in the industry to see if to see who's installing their equipment, and maybe take a trip down there at some point and see what the equipment looks like in person. Because I'd love to see some of this hydronic stuff continue to be used as long as it makes sense, and that always means weighing the options. So.
When you say that, so I've been part of helping people do heating for a long time. I'm not an installer. I'm a retired technician from the university, but it's the emitters. Whenever you have a flame, you have a lot of energy there. It's really easy to heat water, and so it's cheaper if you put in shorter baseboards and you heat the water to 180 or so. But then if you switch that
to a lower heat,
to a heat pump,
do you have enough baseboard?
You don't. Yeah, you only have a fraction of it.
So that's the case-by-case situation. What he's saying is, if the traditional boiler was putting out hot water that was 180 degrees for your heating loops, or if you had a more modern one that was a lower mass, maybe it was closer to 140 degrees Fahrenheit or so. Can we get to those temperatures with the air-to-water equipment? I don't fully know yet. I'm still investigating that. And if we can't, do we have enough footage or linear feet of the hydronics to do the amount of volume heating we need? And in most cases, if it's already been 2, 3, 5 years since you had an energy audit and you're considering any of this, get on the list, do the energy audit again. If there's any chance that you need more insulation, do that, the air sealing, especially when the incentives are good. I know I'm going to be trying to take advantage of some more. I work with folks, as well as the house, the project I'm working with personally, it's only about 10-year-old property, pretty well super insulated, brick wall, not truly a double stud, but brick wall with a non-conductive interior stud, blown in upstairs, and fiberglass downstairs, but it all works really nice. A lot of solar gain, but again, everything's case by case. So there's no cookie cutter solution, and I think a lot of contractors might just want to come in and do the mini splits and say, well, you're probably good to go. But to do that real, true heat loss calculation, get the energy audit, get the blower door testing. I even got myself an infrared camera, so I'm scoping stuff out for people, looking for air leaks and trying to find the real, even the smaller leaks that might have, in the past we might have just let go because again, you're going for the big fish, trying to solve the big problems, and then make it up with a little bit of extra BTU on the equipment. Well, now we're talking about heat pumps. It's kind of hard to stretch a little more BTU out of it without jumping to the next block size. So we're trying to make the buildings as efficient as possible and save as much money and energy going into the equipment investment.
That's what you asked the question, can you use a heat pump with 140 degrees? The answer is yes, but it won't be as efficient. You won't get the total COP rated because that rating is when you're putting out like 100-degree water. So it will do it.
Well,
it just
we'll need to wrap up this conversation for sure. And thank you, Matt, for sharing that cutting edge stuff. And I know I'm one of the people who are waiting for better information. And Al, it's getting really late, so I think I'm going to cut off the questions at this point.
Did I miss anything about the Inflation Reduction Act? I haven't heard that tonight.
No, we're not talking about that tonight. We're talking about mass save.
What?
Yeah, and I hear you, but
If you're putting something in, you can get a 30% installation credit from the government. period.
Right. Yep, so maybe we need another meeting to talk about all that stuff.
It's related to
And
anybody who
it's,
wants to do it.
it hasn't been rolling out as fast as I hoped to, anyway, so that's where we're at. I do want to say that, two things, that Greenfield, that both Travis and Wisty talked about how they had to have upfront cash and pay a bunch of money before they had the 0% interest loan. And the 0% interest loan can't cover that. I mean, just by definition, it can't cover that. So one of the things that Greenfield has been thinking about is if there are people who can't afford that upfront cash, that maybe we would create a revolving loan fund to help people who are in that position. So just keep your ear to the ground, or come and talk to us. If you're in that position, come and talk to us and see where we are in our thinking and what your needs are. So I want to wrap up and thank Wissy and Travis for a fabulous presentation. And thank you so much for coming today. And I wanted to just a few things about what's going on in Greenfield and what we're coming up next. And but I just as I said, we're videoing this. We're going to send this video out so that you can look at it again. And we'll also send out the video for the income eligible pieces. We're also working on a whole series called Transforming Our Lawns that have to do with biodiversity. And our next event, which we have up here, you should get an email about this. It's on April 13th. We have an event called Turning a Barren Lawn into a Thriving Habitat. And it's going to be a Zoom event because Charlie Eisman and Julie Blythe, who are giving it, who are naturalists, just had a baby. So it was inconvenient for that to come. And we wanted to see the baby also, so that's going to be on the video. So, and we're also going to be unveiling a pollinator habitat Greenfield website, which has have pictures of the different pollinator public gardens that we have in Greenfield, and invite you to come and help us. And we're going to be working this summer and fall on the City Hall, in front of the City Hall, at the Johnstown Community Center, the new skate park, and out at Just Foods. So,
what time
thank
is the
you.
event
Excuse me?
On the 13th, you said there's a Zoom event, but you didn't say what time.
Correct.
Oh, thank you.
For asking. It's at 6:30 p.m. And on Zoom. So, thank you so much for coming in. There are evaluation forms on your chair, and if you could take a few moments to fill those in before you leave and leave them on your way out, we would appreciate it. And thank you. This is a long, much longer event than I anticipated, so thank you for your patience.
Just one more quick thought to leave you with in terms of the air-to-water heat pump idea. So as far as I know, most of us around here on residential electric rates, I don't think anyone has a time of use. But if you have friends or family somewhere else in the country and they're on time of use, meaning their rates change depending on the time of day, these radiant hydronic thoughts could become much more economical because storing that heat in water, think of it as thermal storage or a thermal battery. You could create that heat in that tank, whatever that vessel may be, or picture your water tank, with the heat pump when the rates are lower, and then when the rates are higher, you've already got the heat stored to use to heat your space. So in certain places in the country and in the world, this makes a lot more sense, and I think those are the areas we'll probably see the technology evolve a little bit quicker.